Nice to meet you.
Great, welcome back to Senate Education. Following up on Senator Weeks' question a little bit for the end of committee, we are going to have a conversation about PCBs. We're trying to figure out, it looks like we do have a vehicle. H46 was not voted out of this committee. So we might use that as a vehicle to have a conversation about PCB, but we need to hear from the Attorney General, who's coming in next week. Agency of Natural Resources. So either we will look at it or the House will look at it. And also the pro tem is out. So of course we need to have conversations with our various parties about it. But the short of it is the agency in the administration has taken, it seems like a shift around whether or not, from testing PCBs, mandatory testing to now putting a pause. And I think some people feel as though maybe the larger institutions, the most dangerous institutions out there built during a certain period of time have been covered. So it says nothing to you with you, Mr. President. We appreciate you being here. We just wanted to sort of clear that up for our many folks that follow us, including who was invited today by someone who's still figuring it out, Ethan.
Free agent.
Dr. Berg, thanks a million for being with us.
Sure.
We know you are serving as the interim president of Vermont State University, and we've not had you in. And we have the chancellor, and just love to know a little bit more about you. Any goals or objectives you might have while you were in this role, and some information on the Vermont State University in general and how things from your perspective, which is a really unique perspective. You're the interim. You might, I don't know if you're looking for the gig itself full time, but it'd be great to hear your thoughts on the university overall.
Well, I just want to thank you for having me today. Thank you for your support, which has been invaluable as we're in our first year here at VTSU and moving things forward. Let me talk a little bit just briefly about myself in case you're not familiar with my background, but this represents a return to Vermont and the Vermont State College system for me. I previously had spent 19 years at what was then Johnson State College. In fact, I dug this out always, so it's a little dated, but
So you were the president of Johnson State?
I was not the president. I was in my final position I was in there was I was Dean of Student Life and Community Relations.
Okay.
But I had been there for 19 years, student-facing roles at Johnson. And I'll just note that the last probably half dozen years that I was there, I had a number of roles at what was then the system level. Of course, now these are the series of campuses are now part of VTSU. But I chaired the Student Affairs Council, which were the deans of students at the various campuses, Johnson, Vermont Tech, Linden, Castleton, and actually worked for CCB at the time as well. And so had an opportunity through that to spend time on all of the campuses and to develop a colleague and friendships across the campuses. Then I also advised in the last several years that I was there a group called the BSCSA, which was the student leadership from across the various again, then separate colleges, and actually would accompany students here annually to the State House, part of that for their legislative day. So I had experience across the various campuses prior to my return. And I think I was interested in coming back to this, given, and I was following, obviously, I followed the situation of the last few years, have many, again, friends and colleagues who've been here throughout and with great interest and concern. And so when this opportunity came up, the reason that I really was interested in it is because I've seen firsthand the impact of these campuses on the state, how they provide opportunity for students and Vermonters especially that weren't found in other places. And also, I really appreciate and understand the impact that these campuses have on the areas that they're in, regions that they're located in, as an economic and cultural driver and real hub and anchor for those regions and communities. And I believe when the system was established, I mean, these campuses were intentionally located in areas to serve traditionally underrepresented areas. So I think for those reasons, I mean, I see the importance of maintaining a strong future for now VTSU. I'll be frank, I'm in 3 months in, we have our share of challenges, right? And I think one of where I'm devoting a lot of my time and effort right now is just simply building trust, making sure people feel that there's genuine input and inclusion in terms of setting the direction of where we're going from here. So I've spent countless hours talking with students and staff and faculty at all of our campuses, speaking with alumni groups, speaking with local and regional leaders in the areas where our campuses are located to try to make sure again that we're all rowing in the same direction. And I think we're really making headway there. So that's kind of, and I was saying before the meeting started, if I had kind of a quick description of what I hope to see really emerging this next year or so, it's for our students and our faculty and our staff and our communities to really begin to see how we can retain the individual character and culture and even history of some of our individual campuses while seeing the benefits of being part of a larger institution and the resources that could come with that on behalf of our students. And I know you've met the chancellor. I think I've got about a month and a half head start on her. So Chancellor Mao, who has been great. And one thing that she and I share is that, as we move things forward, that always keeping, what's in the best interest of our students as the driver in all of our planning efforts. And if we do that, I think we really can't go wrong. So that's where we're at. I mean, we have work to do for sure, no doubt about it. But I've really been heartened by the response that I've received and had in those conversations. The support that I've felt across the state, I mean, has really been affirming. And I'll share that just one last thing, that even in my conversations that I've had on the campuses, I mean, people have felt very comfortable in sharing their concerns and their worries, but what I think really resonated for me is that there's not resistance to change. There's not just resistance for the sake of resistance. I think almost everyone I've spoken to has acknowledged that for VTSU to be successful, that change has to occur moving forward. It's just that they really want to be sure that there's inclusion in those discussions and informing our direction and making sure we're tapping into our own internal expertise to the extent that we can in those conversations. So that's what I'm committed to. And so that was the last thing I'll say. I'll say one last thing, which is that everyone on the campuses has experienced so much change so fast that I keep saying, if nothing else, what I want to offer in the short term, at least, is an opportunity for folks to catch their breath a little bit and, understanding there's more work to do, more change to come, but to really have us refocused on our work supporting students and to have that be the primary focus of folks' time rather than feeling like they're in constant response mode to the latest change from that pike. So given all that, again, there's hard work to do, but I think we're pointed in the right direction, and I've really been impressed by folks rallying to support that.
Great. So so the two presidents, you and Joyce Judy, you have all of the campuses that Judy basically Joyce doesn't have, and then the chancellor oversees. The two of you report to the chancellor.
The two of us report to the chancellor, yes, right, who is the direct conduit to our board of trustees.
Okay. And you've been able to get around to your campuses.
Yeah, so our campuses, just so everyone knows, at Williston, Randolph, Johnson, Linden, and Castleton. So
Williston, tell me about Williston.
Yeah, Williston is probably the least traditional of any of those. If folks have not, it's sort of, frankly, is a former kind of strip mall set up. It's 4 buildings in a circle off of the kind of heavily trafficked area right there at the corners, right off of the interstate at Williston. And that originally was part of Vermont Tech, so it was affiliated with what's now our Randolph campus, and that's one of the places where a lot of our nursing programs and the like have operated out of. But there is a residential facility there as well, and that was kind of the last. I say that the campuses were originally positioned where they were, to kind of represent underserved areas. the legacy institutions, as we refer to them, are sort of the other campuses. Williston is comparatively newer.
Questions? Two gentlemen represent Castleton
Okay.
area. A couple of us were up there this year in the fall, very impressive. But the students were, speaking for myself, the students we interacted with, I felt had been at a range of institutions in the United States, really talented, interesting people. So that seemed very positive. Yeah. Is there a campus that has your concern, that you have an eye on that, listen, we all have issues in our workplace, areas that we feel are thriving, areas that we might want to improve upon? Can you say something about that?
I would say that,
Not really completely fair
Right,
question,
well-
but anything you could.
yeah, no, it's a good question. I think that the issues and concerns are slightly different per campus, right? I mean, they all again have their individual cultures and history. There's an interesting dynamic in which, a little bit of additional recent history, as some of you know, is that it was probably about 7 years ago now that Johnson and Linden affiliated to become Northern Vermont University. So in some ways, they already kind of went through and have become expert in some of the growing pains that comes along with this sort of exercise. So they're sort of in a different place on that than, say, Castleton, for example, for some of these challenges they're experiencing for the first time. So, in terms of the campuses themselves, and I'll just say that I think the next big, one of the next big initiatives that we're going to be looking at over a period of many years, and being very inclusive in this process, is looking at our physical campuses and needs. And the preliminary work on that in terms of a master planning process started before I arrived. Some of the initial work that we've done with a consultant indicates probably in total we're somewhere around 30% overbuilt across all of our campuses in terms of physical spaces. And so then the question becomes, okay, so how do we make these campuses the best they can be, vibrant, effective spaces for students? I mean, at the same time that we might be overbuilt, we need to invest in some of the spaces we have to improve them. And so I think we're going to have really some exciting conversations, I think, with campus community members and regional planners and agencies and partners in the areas where we're located to talk about creative uses potentially for space that we may not need. I mean, recognizing these campuses were built in a different time with different teaching, learning modalities, and certainly with a different demographic base. So, and I do want to say regarding Castleton, I've really enjoyed it. I've had a chance to connect with some of the folks in the Rutland area. Had a meeting at the hub space, the club space downtown, which is a lot of remarkable. Yeah, well, Jeff, that I met with him and representatives from the mayor's office there, and I think that we see all kinds of ways. I know that there's been such a strong partnership between the city of Rutland and Castleton University, and we don't want to lose that for sure.
Is there still a Castleton office downtown? Some dorms? Okay.
Yeah, there's an art gallery, some residential space. Yeah.
It's an economic driver for, well,
Sure.
areas.
Yeah.
I mean, when you came in, we were talking PCBs. We were talking school construction stuff in general. We have a lot of schools out there that are in rough shape physically,
Right.
even with PCBs aside. Is there room, or I guess I would just say something to think about. I've always loved the partnership between secondary and post-secondary. Kids on college campuses, kids using college spaces for 9 through 12, as you're sort of looking at spaces and talking to community members, for all we know, there could be a school right nearby that is such that the physical plant. The only option is to raise it, and could they then have if you're 30% overbuilt, you said,
Right.
perhaps,
Right.
is there those kinds of
Those are-
opportunities?
yes.
Just
Yeah.
something to think about.
I think those are the kinds of opportunities that I'd be excited about. I mean, when I talk about kind of the ideal so if we have spaces that, aren't needed in their current fashion, are there local or regional agencies or organizations or schools that have space needs that might want to lease or rent space on campus? And how perfect if they had a program or did work that connected with one of our academic programs where then our students could intern right on, at a campus location, kind of bring
Take a class.
vibrancy, energy. Yeah. So So those are the kind of things we, obviously our student needs are going to be our driver and, but, how we can look at community and regional needs in terms of addressing some of the, spaces we might not need for our core functions in ways that are mutually beneficial. I mean, that's pretty exciting to me. I should note that when I was at Johnson, the last several years that I was there, I chaired the board of the Regional Planning Commission there, the Lamoille County Planning Commission. So this kind of, intersection between, how these campuses can really truly be resources to the broader community is really important to me.
Sure, please.
I want to echo what Chair Campion said. Senator Weeks and I were on the school construction aid task force, and it just became clear the crushing amount of money that it can accrue pretty quickly with buildings that are not kept up. So I guess I would just hope that you would prioritize the buildings and grounds and taking a close look. And I know you don't want to rush into major changes, as you said earlier, which makes sense, but and from my lived experience building a high school in Burlington, the construction costs just keep going up and up and up. And I mean, it's astounding. So the sooner you can get on that, the better. I highly encourage you to do that. And then I have a second question, actually. We do have a bill in this committee that you're probably aware of. We're on the board of trustees, and I know that you don't. It sounds like you don't report directly to the board, but
Correct.
do you have a comment or an opinion on the proposal?
Yeah, I mean, I guess, first I'll just be honest, that in the course of, my focus has obviously been on these 5 campuses since I've been here. So it isn't something I've had time to give a lot of review or consideration to. I believe that our board chair, Representative Dickinson, and I think the chancellor have testified on that. And so, and a lot of it is our policy determinations to be made. I mean, I think, I'll work with the board that we have to work with, I guess is what I would say.
Right. I am sort of hearing what you're saying though, in terms of consistency right now for the short term, trying not to shake things up, as there are so many changes already in the works. And so I'm hearing that, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
So how long do you plan to be around?
Well, so I have an agreement. This is
Our closer.
This is a question I've been fielding, so I mentioned I've been making the rounds. I met with the staff federation union.
He's just
group at
getting warmed up by
Linden.
Wait for a second.
Well, part of that is out of my hands, I'll just say. So I agreed to come in and do this on an interim basis. It's a different interim arrangement than the one that Mike Smith had, right? So he came in, it was a very immediate need. So here's the quick version of kind of how I understand this, understanding again that I wasn't here for some of this, right? But there was a full national search conducted that brought in to bring in the inaugural president of VTSU. And a full national search is time consuming and it's a lot of process and expense around that. And unfortunately that didn't last long term. And I think with the departure of the initial president, there was just a need for immediate, filling, which Mike Smith very admirably did. And I think that there had been a commitment, as I understand it, at the time, to the faculty and staff that there would be the likelihood of considering another full national search process, whether there just simply wasn't time to be doing that with all the things that needed to happen in the immediate term. And so it was decided that a reasonable time frame to consider filling to enable another full search, if that was what was to happen, would be to get us through the 24-25 school year. So that's a long way. I apologize. I'm saying that my contract takes me through the end of June 25. So it's a lot of time. I mean, it's for an interim contract. It's enough time to really, I think, have an impact. Again, really impact the culture. And again, hopefully to help continue to build things forward, to stabilize. And what I've committed to the to staff and faculty at the university, because their concern is, again, it's another area where there's been rapid change, leadership, and that can kind of feel disruptive, disorienting, is you know, whether or not, if it's not me, if I'm only doing this interim period, then what I've assured is that we're gonna be moving things in a direction that will be consistent, that there will be a smooth transition to new leadership, and there won't be any kind of abrupt shift and focus at that point. So, but just so you know, because I've been asked this, sometimes interim contracts preclude or prevent you from applying for it full time. There's nothing like that in my agreement. So conceivably, if you know, I was feeling it was going well and others were feeling it was going well, I could conceivably throw my hat in the ring. And right now it depends on the day, but honestly, if I
Thank you.
Yeah, Senator Felix pointed around stabilization is so key, and there's been some instability.
yes,
And listen, that kind of thing happens. There's all sorts of institutions across the United States, and so appreciate your stepping in and willing to do this and taking on such a long period of time. Which I said is
If I could, so
sure.
thank you for coming in and testifying. It's nice to meet you, and we fully recognize we've got a full plate already on hand. But I'm curious though, if you're thinking over the next roughly 18 months of your initial tenure, if you created any kind of goals for the first 6 months or 12 months or 18 months, you know, is there any like, you know, hot burning topics that are at the forefront?
Yeah, well, really the biggest thing, I've kind of alluded to them a little bit already. You know, one is just kind of stabilizing, just to be honest. I mean, things were so disrupted when I came in that I think, you know, just the need to project and for folks to feel some consistency and comfort in what they're doing, and you know, and as I say, to start to really kind of appreciate and understand benefits of being part of a larger university on each of the campuses. And I think we're really making headway. I mean, feedback from faculty has been about how great the experience already has been with some of the mixed classroom experiences where you have students from different campuses. But I think starting this work around the physical campuses, I do think is really kind of the next big thing, the review of the physical plan, the master planning. And so my goal would really be to have that on a path forward. I mean, you know, a lot of what that work will involve, we won't see the fruits of for 10 to 15 years, right? And the world will be a very different place in 10 to 15 years. I always say, you know, 5 years ago, who would have predicted a global pandemic? So I think what we can do is in the next few years, make some really smart decisions and position ourselves with these campuses so that we can be prepared to pivot in the direction that, you know, facts on the ground take us to between now and then. But I do think positioning the work of the master planning, bringing increased stability to the campuses. I mean, again, what's amazing is you think about it, this is the first year still of this university. I think we've got some really exciting, this is the first year really that we're seeing like the test run of the new name being out there. I mean, Vermont, the name Vermont has cachet and means something, and our admissions folks are saying now on the national recruitment scale, like when they're in Denver and Pittsburgh and in Texas, that they're seeing a big uptick in out of state interest. I think, you know, we don't have year-over-year data to compare yet in terms of what the impact of this new entity will be, but I think it is going to generate some attention for us, which is a real upside. And related to that, frankly, the other thing that we need to do is just stop shooting ourselves in the foot, you know, around and having controversies swirling around not in the heart of our admission cycles, which has really undercut some of the efforts in recent years. And I think in that regard, we're in a really good place because I think I really do share a sense of commitment in our faculty and staff to kind of doing everything we can together to advance the university.
Thanks.
challenging times, for sure.
Yeah.
I've been at Bennington College 18 years, demographic shifts, you know, all sorts of issues related to costs, higher education, making certain that middle-class kids, lower middle-class kids, Pell Grant eligible kids can afford higher education. It's incredibly challenging. Also, given all of the costs that are associated with higher education, hiring the best faculty you can possibly get, in addition to inflation and all the other, you know, sort of struggles that we outlined. including, of course, that physical plan. So glad you're there. Please, if there's anything we can do to be helpful, I think we're all happy to chip in.
I appreciate that. I really thank you for this opportunity. And again, really, we couldn't be doing this without the legislature's support and the governor's support. So we're very appreciative of that. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Any final questions? Good. Terry, it's time.
Just a
Here
comment.
we go.
I think we've seen the worst behind us, for sure.
Yeah.
And you got a commitment from faculty and staff, even students, to pull together to fix whatever you decide needs to be fixed. So, you know, if it's bad news, I think they can deal with it as long as they know it up front. So, yeah, but appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you.
Very much so. Great, thank you. And of course, you've got great people like Drake on your team,
Indeed.
and we'll leave it there.
Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you. And Drake, just so you know, we have, you and the secretary will have a conversation, I'm sure, regarding credits, section 9 of the TTE bill. And so she's gonna reach out to all of you and vice versa.
Hi, hello.
Thank you all. Sorry, you get to see the back of my head this whole time, right?
Ms. Emerson,
Yes.
please, and Scott and Melissa, you said
Good to
that,
see you.
I'll let you all organize. How are you, Melissa?
I was gonna give you the nice chair.
Oh, you were?
Thank you.
Well, I think you
Come on up.
we could see.
We've done this as a group now in previous testimonies, so we figured we'd stay with it.
Terrific. And I do appreciate, usually we seem to far up in the upper right-hand corner, so appreciate you coming here.
It's school vacation week and it's a sunny day. Why not?
Great.
It's
Well,
not vacation week for me. We do not have an aligned calendar.
Yeah.
but in all seriousness, for you to come in on a school vacation week, when, you know, we want faculty, staff, administration to take a break as much as they can, I really do appreciate it. It's a lot to us as we're trying to work our way through this. So
Thank you.
So what I think he's saying is that during town meeting week, he's available for meetings at the CT.
Right. We'll switch, right, we'll switch,
So
right.
my understanding is he does attend Southwest quite frequently. So for the record, I'm Scott Farr, the Superintendent Director of the River Valley Technical Center School District in Springfield, Vermont, and the current president of the Tech Directors Association.
And I'm Jody Emerson, Superintendent Director of Central Vermont Career Center in Barrie, and apparently the incoming president of Tech.
Congratulations.
And I'm Melissa Connor, the Director of Stafford Technical Center in Rutland, and the very happy past president of VACTED.
And the joke is Melissa made me do it because we used to work together years ago, so. We looked at the bill, it's changed a little bit since we started first looking at it, so we're gonna try to adjust on the fly. We're also trying to match it up with some thoughtful ask that we would have based on the APA report that came out in April. And we knew that there would be a dialogue around all of this, and we wanted to make sure we had the input of all the technical center directors in the state. And we even crafted a couple letters to put our point of view on of future conversations out. We're going to go back to that, and I think I can see that in documentation that Jody shared with you. As far as governance, and it's not directly in this bill, we felt like we needed to at least have a reaction to it, is governance should be done thoughtfully. We should have in mind that the governance model should best serve the mission of career and technical education and our students. Is too important to rush, and we want to do it right. And we also recognize the bigger conversation of all the education system in the state of Vermont is going to happen over the next few years, and that we want to make sure that we fit in nicely with wherever all of that goes. And we didn't want to be ahead of the curve. We want to make sure we fit very well in that and give an opportunity for the work that APA is doing, that Melissa and I are participating on, to play a little bit as far as the governance piece. So we do share the Secretary's view on that. When our conversation started talking about the funding of CTE, we could predict or see, well, it wasn't predict, but we could see that with the increase in healthcare costs, that the federal funds leaving, public ed. And then 127, we didn't see it at the time, but the transition in funding of the rest of the system, we thought that this might be a good time, if we can, to move quickly to have a non-competitive funding system, because our partners in the rest of the system are really going to feel it this year. And if we can move away to what APA has pointed out, and we have said for at least a decade I've been involved, let's not pit us against the people that we share the students with, so that we can best deliver on the mission. If we can get out in front of this may be a great time to do that. And our original letter of ask back in November said, hey, look, if we could do this, it would be a really cool thing to do. Now, we recognize that all of our budgets are well down the road, and that probably isn't possible. But the thought was, the timing could be good to do something bold. But that ends my section in the first part.
Okay.
And so we wanted to address points 2 and 3 next. The one in talking about requiring or providing access to grades 6 through 8 with career centers. I think
And just so we know, you're referring to the bill itself, 304?
yes.
Great, okay.
And we went more with the starting bullets than digging deep into the language. We took a bigger picture view of it.
Beautiful.
So one of the things that and Interim Secretary Boucher kind of alluded to it earlier from some of the conversations we've had with her, is that every tech center is very different. I can speak, for myself here in Rutland region, we serve 34 middle schools. And for us to try to have every middle school student coming through our building would be a big ask. It would be, hard on our instructors, while we're also trying to do recruiting for our students that want to come here and pursue, 2 years here at Stafford. So what we would ask for in something like that is to really think about that flexibility. I think many of us around the state have some really great models in place, and we would hate to lose some of that. So while we think it's important that 6th through 8th graders get access, we do want to include that flexibility. The other piece too that we've been talking about is really looking at, we have several that are positions within CT that are required, and we would really like to see a middle school position required for every career and tech ed center with salary assistance similar to those other required positions. That would ensure that every middle school student around the state has equitable access to CTE, and that there is a plan and there is somebody that is their point and their purpose within the career and tech ed center. When we talk about grades 9 through 10,
I'm sorry, Melissa, sorry to interrupt your testimony. I think I'm curious about that, the second point on the written testimony that we had, because at least what I was thinking in my mind was, there would be, an annual field trip essentially to the CTE. Are you seeing it more as creating more programs for grades 6 through 8? Is that how the language would be interpreted by you folks?
I think there needs to be flexibility about how that, not necessarily, I don't think it necessarily has to be a visit. Here at Stafford, we have a menu of offerings for all of our middle school partners, and they look and they do what fits within their work of study, which fits within their budget as far as busing. Some of our, middle schools don't have the budget for field trips. And so we want to make sure that we can meet their needs and we can still provide exposures. So it might be us going to them instead of them coming to us. And so just allowing that flexibility. And we have some middle schools that have literally 50 students, and we have some that have close to 300. And so an experience looks very different between, 50 students and 300 students.
Makes sense. Thank you.
Well, Senator Weeks, you want to jump in?
Sure, just a question. So is your vision like a video, like a production, something kind of like some type of audio visual? Here's an introduction as an option to a site visit?
I think that could be an option. I think in many cases, tech centers are going to the middle schools and bringing students to the middle school students, bringing actual activities for them to do to give them exposures. We have a stepped approach, and I know many other tech centers do. We want to make sure that every time that they have an interaction with us, it's a new and different experience, so that as a 6th grader, they're not getting the same thing as a 10th grade visit to our school. So I think every tech center does it a little bit differently. I think we're hitting our middle schools, but it's what works best for our middle school partners and works best for the size of our center and the staffing within our centers. And so I would hate to have a mandate for a smaller center that just simply doesn't have the staffing in order to do that.
Thank you.
This would help us at Central Vermont to expand what we do with our sending schools, middle schools. Right now, we do have a school counseling coordinator who visits each middle school and makes presentations, brings tools from those programs. And then all of our 8th graders do visit us annually. To ask us to have the 6th and 7th and 8th all visit us wouldn't be feasible. And I heard the interim secretary say that's not what they anticipated. But looking at kind of what Melissa just said, it's step model of in 6th grade, we do this, in 7th grade, we do this, and in 8th grade, we do this based on each center and their sending schools relationships. I think that's important.
Yeah, I would quickly add that actually, I view this one section as kind of limiting. There's a lot more already happening as far as middle school outreach. We all have a package of 5 or 6 different things that we do. Many of us have been doing it for many years, and we've been doing it with grant funding. I think it's important enough that it just becomes part of what we do, and that there's a person that is designated to do that, to be an ambassador or liaison with our partner schools to set up for them that makes the most sense. And there's a lot of really cool things happening. I don't have time, but to hear what different centers are doing to introduce ourselves to middle schoolers, it one visit, there's way more happening than that already.
Sharon, go.
Yeah, so the position that you'd like, sounds like you'd like to add a position in CTE to be a middle school liaison. Does that require legislation, do you think, or is that just something that will be incorporated into budgets or?
I think that there are a handful of positions that are required positions within career and technical education, directors, school counselors, co-op coordinators. Those are all partially funded or by the state as a funding stream for the ed fund, that it's important enough that that should get that level of recognition as far as the work. You know, if you look at the co-op position, that's really transitioning students out. Well, we should have a position that helps transition students in and make sure there's a solid level of experiences that move them from career awareness, exploration, and really to career development, what happens at the tech center. So that would be our recommendation.
Yeah, so yes, it would require legislation,
Yeah.
okay. And my other question, sorry to go backwards, but to the funding piece, number 1. So were you in agreement with the interim secretary's proposal? Is that what I heard?
It's changed a little bit. So when she opened, she was talking about going back to a single year FTE model. Then that's transitioned to an interim kind of way of funding that sounds like it would work. We'd like to see what the secretary presents next week, but it sounds like we're going to keep it whole with a chance to move whether an increase where is necessary. That sounds really good. But administrators who are conscious of the bottom line, what does that really mean to us in the end? But it sounds good at this moment, sure.
Is it non-competitive?
Yeah.
How does it, we don't know how it impacts our sending schools and us yet,
Right.
so.
So while we have the secretary here, can you say, is it, you're thinking competitive grants? You're just, no.
No,
So
but I think Jody.
as far as the tuitioning of students, like when I think about what we were asking for in non-competitive, our sending schools right now get some portion of their students' tuition and we get some directly, and then we bill them for a portion still. And so it's a disincentive for them to send kids to us if they really need those funds, right? And so how does this impact them? I don't know that we know that yet.
So my understanding is that there's a base appropriation that's given to that liaison, but it's really on that. No, it's given to the CTEs and it's given to the LEAs for CTEs that are not independent, like the two of you. But my understanding is that then there's a direct tuition model back to the LEAs. And so from that they pay out of their budget. And so I'm not seeing where there's a loss for the LEAs. Like, to me, it's just we're taking the money that already would be going through those that it goes through and actually giving it more directly to the CTEs.
Yeah, our hope would be that they don't even, it's not in their books at all, that you send
That's
as
the
many
intention.
kids as that you want, and there's no direct impact, particularly for a small school, can serve as a disincentive. That's been a decade of conversation, and send them, you don't even see it in your books. Send us 5 more, you don't even see it in your books. That's what we hope we would all along have moved to.
And I apologize, Senator, if I interrupted, you were midway through.
I think I think you just answered. Yeah, thank you very much. That's helpful.
Okay, item number 3, requiring school district to provide students enrolled in grades 9 and 10 a genuine opportunity to participate in pre-tech and exploratory career and technical courses. One of the questions we had is, what really is a genuine opportunity? That was a little ambiguous to us. And for us, some of the challenges when we have pre-tech exploratory programs, which are really just kind of introductory courses to our programming. For a full day center, like many of us are around the state, we have OSHA limits for the number of students that we can have in hard labs. So for us to be able to have pre-tech exploratory programs, we can't have them in the labs because our labs are full with students already, and we would be violating OSHA rights. So it really comes down to some challenges around some of the pre-tech exploratories around space, having space to be able to have them, having the staffing. And then because they are short introductory courses, when I have a partner school that's perhaps 45 minutes away, doesn't make sense for them to be able to come here to Stafford for a 70-minute class and then return on a 40-minute bus ride. In turn, us going out for satellite programs, while it's been done, it is another challenge because, again, it's additional staffing that we have to have, and it's hard enough to get staffing for our regular programs. There's additional cost, and also ensuring that any of the spaces that we're going to be working with meet the requirements for CTE in terms of safety around different equipment. So that's a challenge for us. We definitely are in favor of doing it. I think we've just got to think kind of outside of the box on how can we make that happen in a way that's not a burden to the current system and is a good quality experience for our students. And I think it's still me.
Yeah.
So the other one around requiring the Agency of Education to create supervisory unions to adopt a model of comprehensive career development policy. This is one of the areas that we really feel that we would love to see it worded in a way that it's a partnership between us and our regional high schools within our regional district. There's several reasons for this. One, obviously, to be able to do a lot of this middle school work that we're talking about, that would make it helpful, but it also gets into the areas of high school graduation requirements. I've said this to this committee before, so I apologize if I sound like a broken record, but when you're dealing with anywhere from 10 to 11 high schools that all have different graduation requirements, that makes it a challenge for us to be able to meet all of those needs of all of those different high schools, as well as giving them the technical education. The Vermont Agency of Education has worked with all of our instructors to identify embedded academic credits within each of our technical programs, and we would like to see those mandated to have to be recognized by our partner high schools for more than just English and math elective credits. The example I'd love to give is our engineering program. The science curriculum that they do is a physics class. They're studying physics as part of that. And when it goes on most high school transcripts for that science credit that's embedded, it's listed as an elective science credit. So when that student is going on to apply for post-secondary, an elective science credit doesn't look as enticing to an admissions counselor as a physics credit. So that's something that we feel is really important. And we think by having a career development partnership with our partner high schools, that could help us have some consistency and some clarity so that students around the state are getting credit for the work that they're actually doing in their technical programs.
Senator Williams.
Melissa, that was a question I've had. I've been waiting for the right opportunity. I've personal experience with guidance counselor that had students that were on a college track And then, you know, all the cool kids were going to Tech to do the, you know, the things that they want to do. They wanted to change their career field, their career path midstream and got some resistance from the guidance. How do we get around that? Have you experienced that?
You know, we do, as part of our comprehensive local needs assessment that is part of our Perkins plan, one of the questions we ask our students in our survey is whether or not anyone discouraged them to apply to tech centers. And we had this year about 10% of our current students, so that's just under 30 students, that said that they were discouraged. And about half of those were discouraged by school counselors. They're able to put comments, and one said that their counselor said they were not dumb enough to come to a tech center. That's disheartening that that is still existing. I will say it's gone down. Last year we were at 17%. We're at 10% now. So we're making gains, but the stigma that still is out there, it's disheartening.
It's Connor, can you say something about the other, where some of the other discouragement came from? Or is it just such a mix?
For me, it's-
A lot of it was parents, exactly. Parents discouraging, peers not wanting their friends to leave. But, you know, I would say the majority out of those that were discouraged, it was through school counselors. And I think in a lot of cases, they don't understand because they never experienced career in tech ed. They went through the traditional school pathway. So I think it's, you know, making more awareness. And I think with a career development partnership between tech centers and the supervisory unions, we could improve that.
Yeah, thank you.
I just realized that my piece of this is the same as what Melissa just shared with you. So good job, Melissa. We got that covered. And you can cross that part out. I will add that one of our colleagues indicated that he wants someone to bring up the fact that we do take adult students who have diplomas. For example, in my program, I have cosmetology for 2 years. And so a lot of times the second year cosmetology students may be adult students. And we can only charge 40% of our tuition for those students. And so that also is not helpful in keeping our programs alive. So it's one area that individual wanted us to bring up in our testimony today. So I just wanted to share that with you quickly.
So where does the remaining 60% go from? Just absorb it.
We absorb it. Yeah. Just like we do any other changes and shifts. And we could have in any year, our 6 semester average could be greater than or less than the number of students we have in the village. Yeah.
Oversight of CTE by the State Board of Education to the Secretary of Education. I think our comment would be the rules that govern us are over 20 years old, and we would welcome a change in those rules. So the system it kind of is to where we are now versus where it was 25 years ago. As far as who makes those rules changes and who has the authority to do that, I'm not sure how that happens in state government. Who is it? Well, we should do that. Then whoever usually does that, they should do it again and change it after 20 years of one way. So
We would love for it to be collaborative.
yes.
Was it, do you think it wasn't 20 years ago? Sorry.
No idea.
Who knows?
No, I didn't. You were teenagers, or you were not even, you were.
We'll appreciate that.
It feels like a shift from a state board to the secretary position. It could go at the whim of whoever's in that role. I don't know that it would, but it feels like it could. So as long as that we are consulted or at least brought in, and that there's recognition, I think that AOE has clear recognition of what is required of us for our Perkins, for example, which is really high stringent accountability data and information. So I think they would be, but it's a concern.
So we're good. Yeah. Oh, yes, please, Secretary Boucher.
Hi, sorry. One way to, I think, counter that, which I think is a reasonable, the piece about the shifting is the statute could require the agency to actually engage in rulemaking every 6 years, or, you know, like, so that would actually protect against some of that variability of it being an agency. I also just wanted to remind, so baked into rulemaking, it has to be collaborative. That's the whole reason. Like there have to be public comments. There has to be a lot of opportunities for the public, including obviously the CTE centers themselves to weigh in.
Great.
Number 6, and this is the one around requiring the state colleges to have articulation agreements with our CTE centers. And Jody kind of alluded to the fact that we have very stringent federal accountability measures for our students and our centers. One of them being that we have to actually offer dual enrollment credits, which is different than articulations. And so an articulation agreement is basically a student is doing college level work at their tech center, but the only way they actually get that college credit transcripted is if they actually attend that institution. Whereas dual enrollment, which is what our federal requirement is that we have faculty on site teaching those college level courses, and the college credit is actually transcripted with whichever institution that instructor is actually working with as an adjunct professor. And so that provides portability. And while I understand there's probably a desire to have our students continue on at Vermont institutions, for some of the programs, that's just not an option. So when we think of culinary, right now, there is not a culinary institute in the state of Vermont for our students to take part in. And, you know, some of the other programs, there's specialty areas that they might not be able to find at a Vermont institution that they would want to go outside of the state for, and they would want to be able to take those college credits that they earned. So that is one thing. And in the packet, in our testimony, we provided, these are the requirements that we have for all of our programs going forward for next year. And each year they will increase. And this is, again, federal requirements that we are provided measures on and we have to address in our Perkins plan. And if we don't meet our targets, we have to take 30% of our funding and address it to fix that. And so we have several programs starting next year that are going to require at least 6 transcripted credits or a combination of 3 transcripted credits in an IRC. So for us, it's really important that when we're looking at this, if possible, that it could be, rather than an articulation, a dual enrollment agreement, so that we can be working with our state partners at the post-secondary level, while also meeting our post-secondary agreements. So that is one of the things.
And then for 7, which is the school construction, facilities construction, yes, please keep us in there and keep us in mind. We definitely have facilities that need work, and as you've heard me say more than once, I do not have enough space in the facility that I'm in. My board just signed on an agreement with 2 architects together, the ones that are working up at Burlington as well. And we're looking to a 2029 new building. So there is work in progress and we're gonna need some funding, so please don't forget us there. And I know, Melissa, you're gonna need some too.
Absolutely. So not only are we expanding, we've doubled the capacity of 3 programs. They're not in the most ideal spaces. We've converted traditional classroom spaces to hard labs, which is not ideal, but we're making it work. And we also have some of our outbuildings, which were original in 1974, that have seen better days. That we're actually working on a study right now. We're meeting with architects next week about rehabbing those buildings or replacing those buildings to find out the cost of those.
And I'll chime in quickly. My center doesn't meet, we're new. We're less than 20 years old, and it was part of an effort late 90s, early 2000s that had a plan. They evaluated the sites. Which region should get a new tech center? Southwest in Bennington, River Valley in Springfield, Newport, Green Mountain in Hyde Park. Am I missing anybody?
I think Hannaford had a recent
And
building.
yeah, so there was a plan before that is very similar to what is happening now, and looking at all the buildings, and it all stopped when it all stopped for everybody. So we just want to make sure that we're in the conversation.
And if we're providing some genuine access for earlier years, 9th and 10th grade, we're gonna need more space for that too.
Yeah, please. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
you go ahead.
Well, I'm just looking at graduation rates in some of certain districts here. So Springfield, there is a tech center.
Yeah.
Okay. Your graduation rate, 68%, you know, love to get more kids engaged in tech if that will, or one, if it's of course what they want to do, but also if keep them in school for a long period.
Yeah, you made a good point. The latest data from the last year is
Yeah.
just coming out today, but I think we were at 95% in the last round for students that attend River Valley. As far as they were specifically Springfield,
Yeah,
I couldn't tell you.
please, oh, sorry, Senator Field.
Thank you. Declining enrollment across the state, which is probably gonna continue, even if we bring more people into the state. I assume as you're looking at plans for construction and growth, that you're looking to take over possibly empty spaces in the traditional high school? Cause is it a shift going from the traditional to CPE or?
Our lab spaces cannot take place in traditional classrooms, so that it would be probably more costly to transition traditional classrooms into CTE lab spaces.
Okay.
We're not necessarily looking at that, but as we move into the site selection phase, I know that there are a couple of my sending school high schools that may have interest in our building near them or on their campus. So there may be a campus that has quite a bit of land and they could expand, and then we could share the academic pieces and build our workshops there.
Thanks.
The other data that is that the reduction of student enrollments as far as high schools and regular school districts isn't totally reflected in what happens in CTE. That CTE is at a state level or increased. And I think some of it is what was talked about in the committee is that it's some more students are considering that that's the way that they should go. I think it helps with dual enrollment and all the certifications take some of that stigma away, and more students are seeing that as a pathway. So we've stayed level, I believe, is what the data would show as a CTE system in the state of Vermont.
Right,
My applications have grown every year.
yeah.
Last year you said.
Which is awesome. I was just thinking more in terms of actual physical space.
Yeah.
And you were here when we had the president of, State University, again, locations. If there's any way to partner with, let's say, our state universities, we're talking about the credit piece, but also the facility. I don't know.
Yeah, we have the Howard Dean Education Center on our campus, which used to have 5 or 6 college classrooms. Well, nobody really takes a class in person these days, so we've moved that to early ed and childcare. 4 classrooms of that on the 4th floor because there's a local need for that. And it's a lab for our students in human services program. So we transitioned that based on the need that we had in our region.
And ask, where would Winooski students be able to go if they wanted this kind of CTE experience?
Winooski
Yeah,
students.
is there a career technical institute? I don't know.
Either
So it's
Essex or Burlington.
They would go to Essex or Burlington, okay. And is there an opportunity for kids in Essex North? Just again, looking at graduation rates,
Yes,
Essex
There
or
is.
Burlington.
that's also,
Essex North,
That's
but they don't
Canada.
have but they don't have the full range of
Okay.
programs, so they have some limited programs up there. They have tried to do some cross-state work with
Yeah.
New Hampshire, but that has kind of fallen apart, but they're on our radar, they're always on our
Essex
radar.
County.
thank you.
That's-
Sorry.
And the other,
That's okay.
just tagging quickly on the construction piece, the ratio of students available to the size, the number of spots available at the tech center. Jody Center is 1960.
Yeah,
Yeah, and what has happened to the population in this region? There's been a shift in that some of the tech centers were built at a time when there was less students. We should consider we need more capacity just because the demographics have grown in that region.
So,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, slightly different path. So you started the conversation with kind of the remarkable difference between CTE graduation rates versus traditional high school graduation rates. You also had the comment that you're always, I guess, mostly receiving more applications than you have spaces for. And I'm not sure if that's, I know it's true at Stafford, but my question is, for the cadre of students that apply but don't get in, is there any figure about the graduation rate of that cohort? Like, do they tend to become demotivated? Say, well, heck with it, I'm not in a traditional high school path, can't get into the CTE, I'm out of here.
I don't have that hard data from my sending schools, and probably
You
some of them are like that.
Because I'd be curious if, that's, if there was like this, if there was data that showed that, it'd be great ammunition for you to say, hey, look, really do need more seats because we're losing kids. And, we're not gonna, we'll regain them maybe when they pop back up after getting tired of working at McDonald's, but for adult education, but that's it.
I think one of the things that was posed in the agency's latest paper that I think was presented last week is more flexibility about accessing a different service region when the programming isn't available in your service region. And we work pretty closely with Hartford, who is to the north of us. Hey, I got a kid that needs carpentry. Can they come to your center? Do you have a spot? I think the agency is looking at a way to make that a little easier to do. How do we look at transportation to do that? Because right now, if that Hartford student has to figure out how to come to Springfield to get the training that they want. So I thought you were raising your hand out of the corner of my eye, so.
I think we could do that with the rulemaking.
Yeah.
In the same way that we have designated more than 20 years ago, the CTE regions. That's a piece that could go into the rulemaking to actually crack those rules around like what to do in those situations and allow that permeability.
So I'm thinking primarily, this probably go to Melissa, and I really don't know what I'm talking about, but, right now, the mayor of the city of Rutland have an ad hoc working group, they need housing. And have you got a plan to tie in with the Reddick or the people that, they can't find enough people?
Absolutely. We actually, our Construction Technology Program Advisory Committee met probably about 3 or 4 weeks ago with Mayor Dungus. And we're actually, he's coming up here again in another week to talk about the housing development they're looking at building for low-income housing in Rutland and what role Stafford can play in that for both our construction students and our electrical and plumbing students. And then even our natural resources and forestry students in regards to landscaping. So we are definitely involved in that.
Okay, so how about, the Vermont National Guard, they had, probably 25 years ago now, they had problem with, we call it civilian acquired skills.
Mhm.
So if a M-Day soldier had a civilian acquired skill that would fit into his military, they built a curricula around that. So that you got credit for it. Is that something you have a curriculum that's been dictated, or can you build it?
We have the NCCR curriculum that is for several of our programs. So for construction, there's a core curriculum, which is kind of like basic safety, hand tools, power tools. And then there's a construction, a level 1 construction and a level 2 construction curriculum. That is something that is prescribed by the state that we use in our construction, our electrical, plumbing, HVAC, and welding programs. Those are the ones, I don't think there's any others. I think that's all of them.
Is there any way that any of those could be applied towards like post-secondary requirements for enrollment or for credit, college credit?
At this time, I don't think there's any set agreements. I know that we've had preliminary conversations before the merger of the state college system with VTC in their construction management program. But then the merger was happening, so things kind of paused. So I think that's definitely something that we could pursue.
I guess the reason I'm asking is because you guys are doing the right things and we need what you produce, so.
Yeah.
But there may be a 10-year period when that shifts and we don't need as many. So I'd like to see something get off the ground because you guys are providing.
Absolutely.
Melissa, you get to talk about Palmer. We want to take a run.
I know, I'm waiting for all the eye rolls and people to walk out of the room. They always give me this one. But the need is genuine for a statewide calendar, particularly around professional development for our career and tech ed instructors. If you think of a traditional high school, they have departments and they have, 3 or 4 English teachers or 3 or 4 math teachers or whatever the size of their faculty. For us, our instructors are the sole person in their department. And so for them to be able to really work together and network and be able to learn from one another, it's really challenging. And what happens now is we hire a consultant to do professional development for us statewide. And then they pick, a couple of days during the school year, which means that we could have potentially 4 to 5 teachers out on a school day when students are in session. We have to struggle to get guest teachers. I think I could probably speak for Scott and Jody. We as directors have been subbing in classrooms because we are short subs so that we can ensure that our teachers go to these professional development opportunities. What we would love, and even if we could baby step this in, have 4 guaranteed professional development days for all career and tech ed instructors. Now that's a challenge with the different bargaining units when we have so many different unions around and everything is different depending on which district you're in, but that would really be helpful. Also looking at aligning some of the vacations. Scott and Jody, or Scott particularly, can speak to this better than I, but we have many students, and I experienced it as a teacher when I was in Springfield. Many students, if the vacations don't align, they sometimes don't get a vacation because they're in session at their partner high school and then the tech center is in session the following week. So those students never actually get a break. And it's also challenging. Scott and I experienced it this year. We share Mount Holly, and we have, his school would be on vacation and he has staff there. Mount Holly Elementary aligns with my calendar. And so their kids were off and his teachers were working. So there's lots of challenges for parents, for students, and for educators to have that. And I think those were the key points. And I think when we were talking about, there was a mention of a bell schedule. I've been working, this is my 9th year at Stafford, and it's taken me 9 years to get all but one of my partner high schools on the same arrival and departure time. I still have one school that's on the outlier, but it's obviously it impacts the time that students spend in their program and in their academics in a full day center. But it also impacts the experiences that students have to be able to connect with back at their partner high school, with athletics, with arts, with clubs that they want to participate in. Because one of the things that we always, I think all tech centers do a really good job of, is making sure that the opportunities for students back at their partner high school still exist for them so that they are feeling part of that school community as well. And sometimes when we have varied bus schedules and departure times, it impacts whether they can make it back in time for practice. And so we want to just make sure that our students are able to have a set arrival and departure time that's going to ensure them opportunities back at their partner high school as well.
The calendar piece it's bigger than just what happens in the school, where families are split. Teachers go to different districts, and it's childcare. It is much as we want to think about our school district does it this week. What is the impact on our larger communities? One of the unintended consequences of Act 46 going a few years ago is that Mount Holly got a little bit more choice, and their dance partner is in a different technical center service region. So we work hard to coordinate around our region, but then some of those bordering towns, it's different. In Vermont, there are 3 different school vacation weeks. In April, I think there's 2 now. It really, and somebody when we were testifying, it's house education, if they were talking about what a challenge was, and I go, well, I remember we used to bargain healthcare individually, but we don't do that anymore either. So really, we should be able to figure this one out.
And we're already required to have 171 days, all of our city schools, in common with their CTE, their regional CTE. So 171 of the 175 already need to be in common. So if CTEs just align their schedule, that would force everybody else to align their schedule.
So some of this, yes, will have to be taken up in the House. I mean, we are getting close to crossover, as you know, but when it comes back to us, we can continue these conversations, but we're going to do our best between next week and the following. This. I would like to just go back to Senator Weeks' point. If there is any way to track students, how many students did you not accept last year?
200.
200. And, we have
I can
70% on average of our Vermont students are not graduating, are dropping out, but we have them as done schools 50%. So if we can track those and help these kids get excited and about education, sure.
Yeah, I'll see what I can find out.
I realize it's a heavy lift. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do.
I would assume though, that if I was a CTE and I didn't accept the cadre of students, they kind of drop off the CTE's radar. They go back to the, to the home school, not homeschool, but to the sending school.
Yeah.
Right, and at that point, it's their data management, not. the
Right.
CTE's.
Right.
But if you
And
were
ask
to,
for it.
yeah, if you were to ask them, hey, these are the 200 students.
Yeah.
That didn't get, weren't accepted last year. Or are they now, that kind of stuff really. Very compelling. Very compelling. Yeah, please.
Just one question, something I think you had said about the unions gave feedback on the common calendar. Some of it wasn't positive. There was some resistance. Somebody, anyway.
When
No, you're talking about health.
we testified in House Education, and one of our asks have been for years to have a common calendar. And the committee said, well, that may be more of a challenge than you think, and that's when I said, well.
But somebody mentioned the unions had resistance.
Well, yeah, there's language in that the union can weigh in differently in different places,
I
yes.
just
For the
wanted-
number of days, so for instance, we have 180 student days. And so across all our sending school districts, they might have different variances.
You don't need to get into that detail.
Yeah. That's the one.
Right.
And then when you get literal thinking about the bell schedule thing, like you can't actually have the same bell schedule.
my
since the
question-
Bus.
Hang on, you don't need to go that, the question's very simple. Which unions?
The
Yeah.
teachers' unions.
Teachers meeting,
Yes,
and they're
Okay,
all
so let's be
negotiating
more specific,
individually.
because, if
There's no state.
we're trying to like, I think, understand what
Yeah.
the speed bumps are between here and voting out this legislation.
Yeah.
NEA,
potentially, yes.
okay, that's fair. I'm just curious, like, who should we have testify, right? Who is resistive of the idea? If we identify that, that's out the ballot.
Then we can have a conversation. We have a long afternoon still ahead of us. Any final comments?
I just say thank you. I
Yes.
met with this committee over the years, and it seems like things are gaining momentum, some changes, so we can do absolutely the most we can for our state works. Secretary asked us about what we were excited about, and we're excited that maybe some changes can happen to help us be even more effective than we already are.
Great.
And I think I'm back Tuesday anyway, so
Tuesday.
you have questions.
Yeah.
We'll use each other.
Yeah.
I have the data from the state for my center, because it came through today
Oh.
before I left. And so you can take a look at what information we get back from the agency around our accountability. The very first one is our graduation rate. So mine is 96.47, which is pretty good.
Thank you.
So this is the kind of data that all of the CTEs get. So if you want more of that information, you
You
can.
have one copy there for us?
I just have
Yeah,
one copy,
we'll have to
so.
work it.
I have to put it aside.
Yeah.
give it to me.
So we'll take 5 minutes, and then Senator Shima, I'm gonna have you kick off the SIC for the S-120.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then we'll,
Can you get us copy for?